Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Have you ever wondered how a political figure, despite consistently low public approval ratings, can still exert significant influence and seemingly get their way? It's a fascinating and, frankly, a pretty perplexing question. It really challenges our understanding of traditional checks and balances. Today, we're exploring this very puzzle, looking at recent insights from The Economist and, some additional analysis. We're unpacking a situation where a president with a net approval rating hovering around, minus 14 percentage points, sometimes just in the upper 30s to low 40s, appears to navigate and even overcome what many would consider, foundational democratic constraints. Our mission today is to try and understand why this might be happening. We'll examine the Economist's arguments and add some critical layers of context to get the full picture.
It truly is a paradox, isn't it? It really begs for a deeper look. Conventional political wisdom, it suggests low approval ratings should mean less power, less influence. But we're seeing something quite different play out here, a compelling counter-narrative. What's particularly intriguing, I think, is how the mechanisms of power are being used, not just used, but often leveraged in ways that, they outpace the very systems designed to constrain them. It's this dynamic interplay between action and reaction, where the speed of one often just overwhelms the deliberative pace of the other.
Okay, so let's pull back the curtain on this. The Economist's main argument, and it's really compelling, is that this president operates with an astonishing speed advantage, moving much faster than what they call the lumbering forces that constrain him. They even use an analogy like the TikTok algorithm of politics. Grabbing attention with a rapid-fire succession of actions, then quickly moving on before opponents have even fully registered what just happened, let alone mounted an effective counter. It seems to be all about that relentless pace.
Exactly. And, this isn't just a metaphor for being politically agile. It's often rooted in very specific legal and executive authorities. Think about emergency powers, for instance, like the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, i.e. EPA.
Right.
This act is essentially, kind of like a presidential cheat code for trade. It allows a leader to impose tariffs almost instantly, citing a national emergency, or domestically, framing deployments under the Insurrection Act offers a similar path for really rapid action. The initial executive order, the declaration, the deployment, these things happen in an instant. Any challenge, whether it's legal, political, or public, then faces a huge, often insurmountable time lag. The policy can be in effect, causing real-world changes long before any formal opposition can even begin to, crystallize.
And we've seen powerful, concrete examples of this timing asymmetry playing out, haven't we? Take the deployment of troops to Los Angeles back in June. The Supreme Court, they still haven't even considered its lawfulness. That really shows that profound time lag.
Yeah, it does.
A federal judge did eventually rule that deployment unlawful, but that ruling came months after the troops were actually sent in, after their presence had already had a big impact on public perception and, local dynamics. Or think about the tariffs we just mentioned. The legality of some of these has been an ongoing, drawn-out fight. Definitely not a done deal or fait accompli like some might think.
Not at all.
A federal circuit panel actually just invalidated key IEEPA tariffs. But here's the kicker. The duties are still in place, temporarily, while the administration seeks Supreme Court review. So even if one legal avenue seems closed, a president might just try another one, basically resetting the clock and keeping the policy going.
And this is where the profound implications of that speed advantage really hit home. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Supreme Court's shadow docket, those urgent, often unexplained decisions made without full arguments, that starkly underscores this constant churn. Immediate executive action followed by delayed legal challenges.
Right.
So even if the courts eventually push back, weeks or months can pass. And in that interim period, the initial policy is actively having a profound impact. An executive action can, say, coerce concessions from major institutions like universities, or fundamentally reshape global trade flows through those tariffs, or cement particular narratives like by deploying troops in a city. This speed advantage, as the analysis rightly points out, absolutely deserves top billing in understanding this whole dynamic.
Right.
It's not just about whether it's legal in the end, it's about the tangible, often irreversible impact created by the initial move. Speed, in this context, effectively becomes a political weapon.
Okay, so if this incredible speed is the president's main weapon,
Right.
How is he able to wield it so effectively without, internal opposition? This brings us to the second big factor The Economist points to, The Republican Party's almost unanimous support. It's a really striking statistic. The president has an approval rating among Republicans of nearly 90%.
90%.
That kind of unwavering loyalty, especially for a leader with low overall approval, is pretty rare and profoundly impactful, you'd think.
It is, and it's absolutely crucial to understanding this resilience. This extraordinarily high degree of alignment within the party means that the intra-party costs of defecting are incredibly high. For any Republican to publicly challenge the president, they face immense political risk. Primary challenges, losing their standing within the party structure.
Yeah, ostracized.
Exactly. It's gotten to the point where, as the article vividly puts it, policy debates within the party can actually turn into theological disputation.
Theological disputation, wow.
Yeah, almost like a religious debate about the real meaning of his words rather than straightforward challenges to his decisions or agenda. It creates this kind of closed loop of affirmation where dissenting voices are just quickly marginalized. It's an environment where loyalty really trumps policy debate.
And it's not just inside the party, right? The analysis also brings up what it calls the coordination problem faced by independent institutions. We're talking big companies, universities, news organizations, even law firms. They might want to oppose or push back against certain actions, but it's not that simple for them, is it? They face their own sort of strategic dilemmas.
Well, what's truly fascinating here is how these institutions face what are often described as prisoner's dilemma dynamics. Being the lone refuser, the one entity that publicly stands up and challenges an administration's action, invites direct and often severe retaliation. Meanwhile, their competitors can just quietly free ride on that resistance, avoiding the target on their own backs.
Right. Let someone else take the heat.
Precisely. The article gives a clear, stark example. What might be bad for Harvard's reputation or funding if it challenges an administration policy? Well, it may not be bad at all for its rivals. If one law firm gets picked off by the administration, its lucrative business might just go to a competitor who kept quiet. This dynamic often leads to a strategic preference for, as the analysis notes, a quiet life, which results in apologies, settlements, and a general retreat from confrontation because of the perceived vindictiveness and intimidation coming from the top. It's a powerful disincentive to act as a check.
So we've got the president's speed, the loyal party support, and this coordination problem silencing many independent institutions. Now, let's turn to the traditional opposition, the Democrats. The Economist describes them as confused in the face of this dynamic, grappling with their own messaging, like whether to lean into aggressive all-cap PS social media posts or cultivate a more curated authenticity, or even which way to pull the party, left or center. It paints a picture of a party kind of struggling to find its footing.
And that struggle, that visible confusion, it feeds directly into what we see as the Democrats' brand problem. Polling consistently shows their party favorability at long-term lows, which is really striking when you consider that many voters actively dislike the president.
Yeah, you expect them to benefit more.
Exactly. This creates the perception of a missing opposition. People might not be keen on the current leadership, but they also don't feel a strong, compelling draw to the alternative. It leaves this vacuum where disaffection doesn't automatically translate into support for the other side.
And this is where it gets really interesting, this concept of issue ownership. It's not just about general likability, is it?
No, not at all.
It's about who voters trust more on specific, crucial topics. Voters still overwhelmingly trust Republicans more on issues like crime and immigration.
Those are big ones right now.
While Democrats lead on areas like healthcare, the environment, and democracy, this is exactly the mismatch described in the article. Democrats are strong on issues that, while important, maybe aren't top of mind for a lot of voters right now, so their strengths kind of go unrewarded.
This raises an important critical question, though. Is it only about message discipline for Democrats? Our supplementary materials suggest maybe a more nuanced and perhaps more troubling perspective. It's also about agenda salience.
Agenda salience. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, if the dominant issues of the day, the things voters care most about right now are crime, migration, the economy, global power rivalries, then the Democrats' traditional advantages on issues like health, climate, or democracy, they don't always pay electoral rent.
Meaning they don't translate into votes.
Precisely. They don't translate into votes or political power at the ballot box. This isn't just a rhetorical challenge or a messaging blip. It's a fundamental structural disadvantage. They're essentially trying to sell solutions to problems many voters aren't currently prioritizing. Their strengths become, well, electorally invisible.
And then there's the cold, hard electoral math. We know midterms usually serve as a kind of thermostatic backlash.
Like a voter's correct course.
Yeah.
Punish the president's party. But the pervasive issue of gerrymandering has significantly reduced the number of truly competitive seats.
Fewer swing districts. Exactly. This dampens any traditional pushback. It makes it harder for shifts in public opinion to translate into meaningful electoral change. So the idea that Democrats will surely roar back is therefore not a safe bet. The number of genuinely competitive districts is just too low. It insulates a lot of incumbents from broader political currents.
And what's also crucial here, and sometimes gets overlooked in the standard narrative, is that demographic shifts aren't entirely favorable to Democrats anymore. For a long time, the party relied on this idea of a rising new American majority, driven by a growing diverse electorate.
The coalition of the ascendant, yeah.
Right, but recent trends show Republicans actually making inroads with non-white and young voters, while Democrats have continued to lose a significant portion of the white working class. This really challenges that long-held assumption of Democrats representing the real majority and forces a rethink of long-term electoral strategies. It's a shifting landscape that complicates future projections. Neither party can really take demographic trends for granted anymore.
So we've outlined a pretty compelling case for how an unpopular president can exert so much influence. Speed, party loyalty, coordination issues, opposition struggles. But this picture of swift, unconstrained executive power, maybe it's too absolute. What might be missing from this analysis? Are the guardrails truly, inert? Or are they just slower and maybe more subtle in how they operate?
That's an excellent and necessary question. It's vital to add some nuance here. One significant structural shift not fully grappled with in the Economist's column is the impact of recent administrative law changes, particularly the Loper-Bright Supreme Court decision from 2024.
Right, the Chevron deference case.
Exactly. That ruling essentially scrapped Chevron deference, which is a long-standing principle giving government agencies a lot of leeway in interpreting laws and implementing policy. Now, in theory, this limits agency latitude, which might seem like a direct constraint on a president who relies heavily on executive agencies.
Yeah, seems like it would slow them down.
But in practice, it can actually invite more litigation and more uncertainty. It can slow down any durable constraints and allow policies to kind of live or morph while they're stuck in litigation.
So it creates more legal battles, which takes time.
Exactly. So it's not a clear-cut win for limiting power. It just shifts the battleground and often prolongs the fight, which ironically can make the initial action even more impactful because the final word takes so long to arrive.
That's a critical distinction. It sounds like the guardrails aren't entirely gone, as you say. They're just operating differently, maybe? Courts have slapped down actions like the LA troop deployment and some of those key tariff authorities we mentioned.
They have.
So while the initial action might be swift, the portrait of completely unchecked power feels a bit too absolute if you only look at that first move. The legal system, slow as it is, does eventually engage.
Precisely. I'd suggest a more critical framing here. It's less about one-man rule and maybe more about one-man agenda under judicial review.
Okay, that's a useful way to put it.
The key analytic question isn't just whether the president can act initially, but how often those actions actually stick after court review, after international bargaining, and so on. For example, the administration's most expansive interpretation of its IEPA powers on tariffs, well, that's already wobbling in the courts, as the article notes.
Right.
This reinforces the idea that institutions still matter. Legal challenges aren't entirely futile, but, and this is the crucial part, timing still matters more for that immediate real-world impact. The struggle is often prolonged, it's messy, and the policy can definitely leave its mark long before a final verdict is delivered.
Fascinating. Okay, so for those listening, what should we be watching next? Where should we focus to see how these complex dynamics play out? Where are the key battlegrounds?
A few critical areas, I think. First, keep a very close eye on IEPA at the Supreme Court. Will the court decide to cabin presidential tariff powers, create a lasting constraint on this act-first approach to trade? Or will it allow for more emergency-based economics, basically solidifying that speed advantage? That decision will be huge for trade and foreign policy.
Okay, IEPA et SCOTUS.
Got it.
Second, watch emergency docket behavior at the Supreme Court. This is where the highest stakes executive actions often land first, asking for quick rulings or stays. How will the court manage the tempo of these decisions on really high salience executive actions? The speed or the deliberateness they show here will dictate how effective that move fast strategy remains for any administration.
Right, the court's own pace matters.
Definitely. And finally, observe the Democrats' issue pivot. We're seeing early signs of a push to center issues like affordability and anti-corruption, while deliberately trying to avoid what's been called those tone policing fights that often distract from their core message.
Trying to stay focused on substance. Yeah. Whether that's enough to fundamentally change the perception of their extremism or reestablish their agenda salience, well, that's the open question, but it could really alter the political landscape if they succeed.
So what does this all mean for the balance of power in a democracy? Especially when, as you say, getting your way can mean temporary but incredibly impactful policy, even if it gets overturned later. The core insight here seems clear. The speed advantage, coupled with these strategic coordination asymmetries both within the opposition and the president's own party, it allows an unpopular president to rack up wins and set narratives, even if those wins are only interim. But the longer game, as you put it, will absolutely be decided in courtrooms, on the Supreme Court's emergency docket, and by whether Democrats can actually force the national agenda onto terrain where their advantages matter.
Yeah, that sums it up well.
This isn't a static situation at all, is it? It's a truly dynamic push and pull, where timing, strategic coordination, and the resilience of democratic institutions are just. Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.